Chapter 1. The Cage of Marriage. In the metropolis enveloped by prosperity and hustle and bustle, the towering skyscrapers seem like silent giants, coldly observing the traffic and hasty crowds at the end of the streets and alleys. The city is a hotbed of dreams and a battleground of desires, where countless people harbor visions and ambitions, chasing their own glory and wealth in this steel jungle. However, for Isabella Rossi, it has become a cold cage, locking her freedom and imprisoning her soul. A year ago, family power and old traditions were placed around her neck like heavy shackles. She was forced to marry Alessandro Moretti in a loveless family marriage. Before the wedding, Alessandro was just a strange name, a blurred face and a destiny that had been forced upon her by others. On the day of the wedding, the lavish auditorium was decorated with flowers and crystal chandeliers. The guests were dressed in fancy clothes and laughter echoed in every corner. But Isabella felt like a bystander. Although her face was smiling, her heart was full of bitterness and helplessness. She looked at Alessandro beside her, the man who will spend the rest of his life with her. But there is not the slightest love and expectation, only deep fear and confusion. After the wedding, Isabella lived in Alessandro's palace-like mansion. Spacious rooms, beautifully decorated, expensive furniture, everything highlights the wealth and status of the family. However, these material advantages could not fill the emptiness and loneliness of her heart. Alessandro is busy with the family business, leaving early and returning late, and has little interaction with her. Even when they occasionally met at home, there was an invisible barrier between them with few words and a cold atmosphere. Alessandro's parents also treated Isabella with detachment and indifference. In their eyes, Isabella is just a tool for the family marriage, a daughter-in-law married in order to consolidate the family's business relations. They have never really regarded her as a member of the family. Whether it's the pleasantries at the dinner table or their everyday life, their attitudes are polite and rusty, making Isabella feel like a guest living in someone else's home, never able to integrate into this so-called family. Isabella tries to change this. She tries to learn how to be a qualified wife, prepares dinners carefully and takes the initiative to care about Alessandro's work and life. But for every effort she makes, all she gets in return is Alessandro's perfunctory and indifferent behavior. He turns a blind eye to her efforts and a deaf ear to her concerns, as if she were just a dispensable ornament in the family. In this seemingly perfect family, Isabella could not feel the slightest bit of warmth and love. She was like a bird trapped in a gilded cage. Although she was well-fed and clothed, she lost her freedom and happiness. Every day of her life was like a blunt knife cutting her flesh, little by little eroding her will and hope. She often sat alone in the spacious living room, looking out the window at the busy street scene. Tears involuntarily slipped down. She missed the freedom of her life, the joyful time she had spent with her family and friends, which were now a distant memory. Isabella had also tried to turn to the family for help, hoping that they would understand her pain and help her get out of this painful marriage. But the family's response made her completely despair. They only cared about the family's interests and reputation, and they cared nothing about her feelings. In their eyes, this marriage is an important bargaining chip for the family, which cannot be easily given up. Isabella realized that she had been completely abandoned by the family and became a victim of their interests. Thus, Isabella could only bear the loneliness and pain alone in this cold home. She struggled silently in the darkness, searching for an exit of relief, but never found a ray of hope. Until one day she found out she was pregnant. This unexpected news, like a beam of weak light, illuminated her dark world, but also let her heart lit up a ray of hope to escape. Chapter 2. Desperate Escape. From the moment she learned she was pregnant, Isabella was pulled by two strong emotions within her. The joy of a new life and the desire to escape from the prison of her marriage were intertwined in her mind. During her long pregnancy, she walked on thin ice, careful at every checkup, fearing that any slight mistake would jeopardize her escape plan, which was taking shape in her mind. She knew that the baby in her belly might be the only chance for her to escape from this painful life. Finally, the day of delivery arrived. In a notorious hospital that reeks of antiseptic water, Isabella goes through the pain of life and death. When two weak but powerful cries rang out in the delivery room, a long-lost smile appeared on her tired face, and her eyes were filled with the tenderness and joy of being a new mother. However, fate mercilessly dealt her a heavy blow at that moment. The doctor, holding the newborn twins, told Isabella with a grave expression that her brother Luca was born sickly, his breathing was weak and his vital signs were extremely unstable, so he had to be sent to the intensive care unit immediately to receive prolonged and intensive medical care, or his life would be in danger. Isabella looked at Luca, who was hurriedly pushed away by the medical staff. Tears instantly blurred her eyes. Her heart seemed to be severely gripped by a big invisible hand. Pain spread to her whole body. After a short and painful struggle, Isabella made the most difficult decision of her life. She held back her inner grief and reluctance, and turned her attention to her relatively healthy youngest son, Matteo. She realized that she could not hesitate any longer and had to fight for her future and that of her child. Isabella knew that in order to completely escape the past, she had to cut off all the clues that might reveal their whereabouts. With the contacts and resources she had accumulated over the years in the family, she began a series of covert operations. First, she privately contacted a key person she once knew from family business dealings, who was quite skillful in the field of information manipulation. Isabella told him of her tragedy and, in tears, pleaded with him to help erase all traces of Matteo's existence. With a high reward and a plea, he eventually agrees to help her in secret. Meanwhile, Isabella paid off the doctor and nurse in charge of delivering the baby at the hospital. She told them her situation, the doctors and nurses, although the face of the difficult, but in the temptation of generous compensation, eventually chose to cooperate. They promised to conceal the fact of Matteo's birth and destroy all medical records related to Matteo. In addition, Isabella turned to Alicia, a close friend from before her marriage, for help. Alicia was an intelligent and righteous woman, and they had shared many happy times together as young girls. Although Isabella's contact with her had dwindled since her marriage, Isabella was certain that Alicia would be able to help in this life and death situation. Isabella dialed Alicia's number from a public phone booth at the hospital, and Alicia's familiar and concerned voice came on the other end of the line. The moment she heard her friend's voice, Isabella's tears came to her eyes, and she poured out her story unreservedly, her voice full of pain and despair. Alicia listened with righteous indignation on the other end of the phone, deeply sympathizing with Isabella's sufferings, and at the same time, incomparably angry at what Isabella's family had done. When Isabella made a request for Alicia's help in erasing all traces of Matteo's existence in this world, Alicia did not hesitate for a second and said firmly, "Isabella, don't worry, I will definitely help you. I can never watch you and your child continue to suffer." With Alicia's assistance, a series of covert and tense actions unfolded in earnest. Alicia used her connections in the field of network technology to find a skilled and trustworthy hacker. The hacker is impressed by Isabella's story and decides to join the covert operation. The hacker hacks into the hospital's system and deletes Matteo's birth record, altering the relevant registry information to make it seem as if Matteo had never existed in the world. The doctors and nurses who had been bribed to work together skillfully within the hospital destroyed all the paper documents and files related to Matteo. After everything was ready, Isabella once again went to the window of the intensive care unit and gazed quietly at Luca lying on the hospital bed through the cold glass. His small body was surrounded by all kinds of instruments, looking so fragile and helpless. Isabella's tears broke the bank again and she silently swore in her heart, "Luca, my baby, Mommy doesn't not want you. Mommy will definitely come back to get you. You must be strong, you must wait for Mommy." Finally, Isabella hugged Matteo, took a deep breath, and stepped out of the hospital door with determination. She knew clearly that she couldn't turn back and what awaited her and Matteo would be an unknown journey, but as long as she could get out of this cage, it would all be worth it. Chapter 3. Obsession and New Life. In a distant West Coast city, Isabella and Matteo's life is gradually getting back on track, like a ship that finally sails into a calm harbor after a storm. Isabella's startup company is firmly entrenched in the business world, and the office is filled with people, paperwork, and ringing phones. Busy between meetings, negotiations, and decisions, she has built the company from a small creative prototype to an up-and-coming force to be reckoned with in the industry, thanks to her excellent business instincts and tenacity. Matteo is also at home in the digital world, often sitting in front of the computer for hours at a time, his fingers flying on the keyboard, the flashing code on the screen as if it were his magic spell, helping his mother solve one tricky technical problem after another. However, in every busy interval when Isabella was alone, her thoughts always drifted uncontrollably to faraway places. Luca, the child she had been forced to leave behind, was like a thorn in her heart, and every recollection was accompanied by excruciating pain. At night she often woke up from her dreams, in which Luca's helpless eyes and faint cries seemed to echo in her ears. During those long dark nights she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, tears slipping silently down, the thoughts in her heart growing wildly like weeds. She blamed herself countless times in her heart, hated her own powerlessness, hated the family's callousness, and hated the fate of their mother and son's trickery. With the company's gradual and steady development, the various businesses methodically into the automated process, Isabella on the surface to maintain the image of a capable woman, but deep down, the desire to reclaim Luca is like magma surging in the ground, in the day-to-day thoughts of the hotter and hotter, at any time may come out and completely engulfed her. She knew that she could no longer afford to waste time in this illusion of stability, and that she had to take immediate action to prepare for her return to her homeland and her son. Isabella recalled the cruelty of the family. They will do anything for profit, their marriage as a bargaining chip, wantonly manipulation, and remembered Alessandro and his parents' indifference in that cold mansion. I have never felt a trace of the warmth of the family. Every look, every word is like an ice knife cut in her heart. This painful past has become a wound in her heart that cannot be healed, but also turned into a strong motivation for her to change. She was not willing to be manipulated by fate, and was determined to completely reinvent herself from the inside out. She made a lot of inquiries and finally contacted a doctor who is well known in the field of plastic surgery. Stepping into the consultation room for the first time, Isabella's hands clenched involuntarily and her palms were covered with sweat. She slowly sat down and took out the yellowed photo from her bag, which showed her once naive and carefree self, full of hope for the future, a far cry from her current weathered appearance. She took a deep breath, raised her head and looked straight into the doctor's eyes. Her voice trembled slightly, but with unquestionable firmness. "Doctor, I want to completely change my appearance. Everything in the past I want to leave behind. I need a fresh start." The doctor looked at her carefully with understanding and admiration in his eyes, listening patiently to her every word and giving her professional and pertinent advice from time to time. In the days that followed, Isabella bravely embarked on the arduous path of cosmetic surgery. Each surgery was long and torturous, and after the anesthesia wore off, the pain in her body was like a tidal wave. But what was even more unbearable was her deep-seated fear of the unknown and her longing for Luca. But as soon as she thought of Luca's lovely face and that he might be suffering alone, Isabella clenched her teeth, held back her tears and discomfort, and pushed through the trauma of the surgery over and over again. She knew that this was her path to a new life and reclaiming her son, and she would never back down no matter how painful or tiring it was. While her body was recovering, Isabella began to investigate Alessandro and Luca's situation. She utilized the contacts she had accumulated in the business circle and carefully collected information about them. The news from various sources pieced together a blurred picture. Alessandro was still active in the business arena, and his career was getting bigger and bigger. Luca, on the other hand, was mired in a world of loneliness and silence, diagnosed with autism and had almost no social activities. The news made Isabella's heart clenched even tighter. She wanted to fly to Luca's side immediately and hold him tightly in her arms. In order to get closer to Luca, Isabella decides to apply for a job as Alessandro's personal secretary. She re-examined her resume and carefully revised every detail, highlighting her strengths in business management, communication and coordination. At the same time, she also attended some high-end business etiquette training courses to learn how to behave gracefully and appropriately on various occasions. During the days of preparing for the interview, she practiced her smile, posture and the way of answering questions in front of the mirror every day, repeatedly simulated the interview scenarios, and prepared multiple sets of answers to every question she might be asked. She knew that this was a war without smoke and she had to do her best to make no mistake. Finally, the day of the interview came. Isabella was dressed in a set of exquisitely cut black professional suit, a pair of black high heels, her hair neatly tied behind her head. The whole person exuded a confident and capable temperament. She took a deep breath and walked into the room where the fateful interview would be decided. Alessandro sat behind a wide desk, his eyes scrutinizing the unfamiliar candidate in front of him. When Isabella looked up and met Alessandro's gaze, her heart beat steeply faster, but she quickly adjusted her breathing and a just-right smile bloomed on her face. The moment Alessandro saw Isabella, an inexplicable sense of familiarity welled up in his heart, as if the person in front of him had left a deep imprint on his life, but he couldn't remember where he had seen her before. During the interview, Isabella answered the questions with her solid professional knowledge and excellent adaptability. Her clear thinking, precise language expression and calm attitude made every interviewer present secretly marvel. As Alessandro watched her, the doubts in his heart grew stronger. He carefully observed Isabella's every move, trying to find a trace of familiarity in her words and actions, but Isabella was like a perfect actor, not revealing any cracks. After the interview was over, Isabella left the interview room with trepidation, knowing that her fate was about to take a major turn, and this was just the beginning. Chapter 4. Initial Entry and Shocking Changes. The moment she succeeded in the interview, Isabella's heart was full of mixed feelings, both the excitement of being close to Luca and the fear of the unknown. On her first day of employment, she arrived at the company early, dressed in a tailored professional suit, pulled her hair meticulously behind her head, and deliberately used delicate makeup to hide her inner apprehension. Walking into Alessandro's spacious and bright office, Isabella's eyes quickly scanned every corner, trying to find traces of Luca. The room smelled faintly of coffee and leather, several abstract paintings hung on the walls, and huge floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the bustling city streets. Her eyes fell on the desk where a photograph lay, and when she saw that the person in the photo was her former self, Isabella's breath caught instantly and her heart beat wildly and uncontrollably. Her hands trembled slightly, wanting to pick up the photo but afraid of leaving a mark, her heart filled with doubts and anxiety. Why did Alessandro still keep this photo? Had he recognized himself? After a short period of panic, Isabella took a deep breath, quickly adjusted her emotions, put the photo back to its original position as if nothing had happened, and began to organize the desktop. At that moment, Alessandro pushed the door in. His tall figure stood in the doorway for a moment, and his gaze fell straight onto Isabella. Isabella smiled politely and greeted him, doing her best to sound smooth and natural. Alessandro nodded slightly, his eyes revealing a hint of imperceptible scrutiny as he took a seat at his desk and flipped through his papers while instructing Isabella to prepare the materials for the morning's meeting. As Isabella turned to leave the office, she could feel Alessandro's gaze falling on her back, and a slight chill ran down her spine as she took every step with extreme caution, fearing that her cracks would be discovered. In the following days, Isabella gradually integrated into the company environment. With her excellent business skills and conscientious and responsible attitude, she won the recognition and goodwill of her colleagues. In casual conversations with her colleagues, she learned many things about Alessandro. To her great shock is that the company is rumored to have died, and Alessandro in her death, always alone, despite the sight of a number of excellent women to take the initiative to show good, he refused. When co-workers get together to gossip, they rave about Alessandro's infatuation, not realizing that Isabella is alive and well and standing right next to them. One lunchtime, a few female co-workers were sitting around talking about the company's singles. One of them said, "What do you think, Mr. Moretti? After all these years, he is still obsessed with his dead wife, and all those beautiful women who come to him on their own accord can't even catch his eye." The other one picked up, "Yes, I heard that he even put his wife's photo on his desk and looked at it every day. This level of deep love is the first time I've seen it." Isabella sat on the side, quietly listening, the fork in her hand unconsciously stirring the food on her plate, but her heart set off shock waves. How could she not have expected that Alessandro would declare her dead to the public, much less that he would remain single? The news made her more curious and puzzled about Alessandro's inner world, and at the same time complicated her plans. On the one hand, Isabella had to deal with Alessandro carefully at work so that he wouldn't realize her true identity. On the other hand, she had to take advantage of every opportunity to find out what was going on with Luca. She often stayed at the company after work on the pretext of organizing documents, and quietly accessed information related to Luca. Once she found some of Luca's medical reports in Alessandro's private filing cabinet, looking at the dense specialized terminology and Luca's various inspection data on it. She was so distressed that her eyes reddened. She knew that Luca must have suffered a lot over the years, and she must find an opportunity to reunite with Luca as soon as possible. In her daily dealings with Alessandro, Isabella was always on guard. Once, Alessandro suddenly asked her, "You look familiar, haven't we met somewhere?" Isabella's heart snapped, but she quickly composed herself and replied with a smile, "Mr. Moretti, maybe it's my popular face that gives you this illusion of familiarity. I've worked for other companies before, maybe we've crossed paths in some business situations." Alessandro stared into her eyes as if trying to find a crack in her expression, but Isabella was calm and collected, her gaze was frank, and eventually, Alessandro averted his eyes and said, "Perhaps I remembered wrongly." Isabella breathed a secret sigh of relief, knowing she had dodged another bullet. As time went on, Isabella grew accustomed to the dangerous and stressful life. She played the role of a competent secretary in the company while looking for an opportunity to get close to Luca. And this opportunity finally crept in on a seemingly normal day. Chapter 5. An unexpected swap. After Isabella had been working in the Alessandro household for some time, it was always in the back of her mind how to get Matteo and Luca to recognize each other. She knew that this step was crucial. It was about Luca's ability to find happiness again, and about the broken family's ability to become whole. One seemingly normal afternoon, Isabella saw her chance. Alessandro had gone out to attend an important business meeting, and the servants were busy with their own affairs, so the whole mansion was filled with a busy but organized atmosphere. On the pretext that she needed to deal with some urgent documents and needed a quiet environment, Isabella locked herself in the study, but in reality she was keeping close contact with Matteo through her cell phone. Matteo, at that moment, was standing on a street corner not far from Alessandra's house with a mixture of nervousness and anticipation. He was dressed in a simple t-shirt and jeans, his eyes shining with determination and curiosity. After receiving the message from his mother, he took a deep breath and took a step towards the luxurious mansion. With the route he had carefully planned with his mother earlier, Matteo skillfully avoided the patrolling security guards and gently made his way around to the side of the mansion. There was a half-hidden window, the very passage Isabella had left for him in advance. Matteo carefully pushed the window open, rolled over and leapt inside and found himself in the middle of a long corridor. He followed the layout he remembered and headed towards Luca's room. Along the way, Matteo's heartbeat was like a drum, and he took every step with extreme caution, fearing to make the slightest sound. When he finally arrived in front of Luca's room door, his hand hung in mid-air, hesitated for a moment and finally gently pushed the door open. Luca was sitting in the corner of the room, surrounded by various toys and books, but he was immersed in his own world, indifferent to everything around him. When he heard the door being pushed open, he raised his head slightly and his eyes met Matteo's. At that moment, time seemed to freeze. Luca looked at the child in front of him, who looked exactly like himself, and his eyes were instantly filled with curiosity. His lips trembled slightly as if he wanted to say something, but he was momentarily speechless. Seeing this, Matteo swallowed nervously and whispered, "Hey Luca, I am your twin brother Matteo. Mom sent me to see you." Luca's eyes widened, the confusion and defensiveness in his eyes gradually being replaced by surprise. "Twin brother," he muttered, his voice slightly raspy, apparently because he rarely spoke in general. "I actually have a twin brother?" Matteo nodded vigorously, his eyes reddening slightly as he slowly walked over to Luca and sat down. "Yes, brother. Mom has missed you all these years and I've missed seeing you." Luca stared at Matteo as if he wanted to carve his look into his heart. "Where is Mom now? Is she doing well?" he asked eagerly, his eyes filled with longing. Matteo took a deep breath and began to detail his life with his mom over the years. He told of their time in the new city, of the hardships his mom had gone through to raise him, and of how much they missed Luca. Luca listened intently, sometimes frowning, sometimes showing surprise, curious about all the things his mom had done. Matteo, on the other hand, was equally curious about this dad that his mom never mentioned in this luxurious but cold home. He looked around the room at the beautiful decorations and expensive toys, but he couldn't feel an ounce of warmth in his heart. "Brother, are you doing well here?" he couldn't help but ask. Luca's eyes dimmed and he shook his head gently. "Although there is everything here, I am very lonely. Dad is always busy and rarely has time for me, and everyone else is cold to me as well." Hearing his brother's words, Matteo's heart sank. He held Luca's hand and said, "Brother, let's switch identities. I'll come and experience your life and you go and experience mom's in my life. Maybe that will change things. A flicker of hesitation flashed in Luca's eyes, but soon, curiosity overcame everything. He nodded and said, "Okay, let's switch." And so, in a small burst of excitement and nervousness, the two children began to exchange clothes. They helped each other organize their clothes with anticipation in their eyes. When everything was ready, they looked at each other and couldn't help but smile. An adventure full of unknowns and surprises began. Chapter 6. The Search for the Truth. Alessandro and the servants at home were pleasantly surprised to find that Luca seemed to be a different person. He began to become active, initiating interactions with people, and would even occasionally flash a bright smile. Although Isabella soon senses the secret, she decides not to move, will trick, and use this rare opportunity to probe deeper into the root of Luca's deep-seated hurt. As time passed and Isabella spent more and more time with Luca, she became more and more certain that Luca's problems did not stem from autism, but rather from a deep-seated trauma about being abandoned by his mother. The gossip of the people around him, like cold arrows, shot into Luca's young heart, making him choose to close himself off and never reveal his true feelings to anyone again. Finally, one quiet night, Isabella felt that the time was right. She gently sat on the edge of Luca's bed, gazed tenderly into his eyes, and said in the voice that was full of deep emotion and that only a mother could have, "Luca, my baby, Mommy knows that you've suffered too much all these years. Mommy really didn't leave you out of intention. It was your grandparents. They used all sorts of means to force Mommy. Mommy was really desperate at that time." Luca's eyes widened, staring straight at Isabella. At that moment, his eyes flashed with a trace of complex emotions. There was surprise, there was aggression, and there was even a trace of desire for the truth. Isabella's words were like the first ray of sunlight in spring, trying to penetrate the thick layer of haze in his heart. After a short period of silence, Luca slightly opened his mouth, his voice with a hint of trembling. "Mom, why are they doing this? Why does everyone say that you don't want me anymore, that you don't love me?" Isabella's heart seemed to be pierced by millions of steel needles at the same time, and tears instantly blurred her eyes. She fiercely held Luca tightly in her arms, sobbing uncontrollably, "Baby, Mommy loves you more than anything in this world. Mommy made that wrong decision at that time because she was too afraid of losing you both. Mommy was wrong. Can you forgive Mommy?" In Isabella's warm embrace, Luca's tense body gradually relaxed, and his tears came out of his eyes, tears that were filled with years of aggression and pain, but also with the desire for a mother's love. From this moment on, the door in Luca's heart that has been closed for a long time, completely open. Chapter 7. Escape and Reconciliation. With Luca's heart gradually unraveling, Isabella knew it was time to take her two sons away to start a whole new life. She prepared meticulously, going over every detail again and again. On a seemingly normal day, she began her escape plan while Alessandro was away on a business trip. Isabella carried her long-packed bags quietly to the door, and her two sons stood beside her with both anticipation of the unknown and a hint of nervousness in their eyes. Matteo held his mother's hand tightly, while Luca trembled slightly, both excited and a little uneasy. Isabella comforted them softly, trying to sound calm. "Children, we're about to start a new life. Don't be afraid, Mom will always be with you." Just at the moment they were about to step out of the house, a cold and familiar voice suddenly rang out, "Where are you going?" Isabella's body instantly froze, and she slowly turned her head to see that Alessandro had stood in the doorway at an unknown time, with complicated eyes that were no longer as cold as she thought they were, but instead carried a hint of scrutiny, pain, and reluctance. Isabella took a deep breath and tried to keep her voice steady. "Alessandro, I'm taking my sons. After all these years, I will never let you or my family control our lives again. Luca needs me and I can't afford to lose him again." Alessandro took one slow step toward them, his gaze sweeping back and forth over Isabella and the two boys, his voice low. "You think you can come back so easily, take my sons and walk away? I recognized you from the moment you stepped into the office. I stayed silent just to find out why you came back. I investigated Matteo's existence, and while I was shocked, I was relieved that you raised him so well. The interchange of the two children made me realize how much I owe Luca." Isabella's eyes widened, not realizing that Alessandro had already known everything. She subconsciously shielded her two sons tighter, watching him warily. Alessandro paused and continued, Isabella, the year after my marriage I neglected you like that, not because I didn't love you, but because I hadn't yet gained a foothold in the family, and with people around me eyeing my position, I couldn't let you become my weakness, a handle to be used. I know I was wrong and I pray for your forgiveness, and I want you to come back to me along with the children. There was a hint of supplication in his voice, and his eyes were filled with longing. Isabella's heart was mixed, her eyes were moist, but she shook her head soberly. Alessandro, the pain I have suffered and experienced over the years is not something you can make up for with a few words. I can't tell if your feelings for me are love or your obsession with your position. At least for now, you don't deserve my forgiveness. Her voice carried a hint of trembling, yet it was incomparably firm. For a moment, the entire room fell into a deathly silence, as if the air had frozen. Isabella and Alessandro just stared at each other, their eyes intertwined with complex emotions. There was resentment, there was guilt, and there was also a hint of understanding for each other. After a long time, Alessandro sighed. He looked at his two sons, his eyes full of reluctance, but in the end he chose to let go. Perhaps, letting the children stay by your side is the right choice. You must take good care of them. Isabella looked at Alessandro in surprise. She had expected to face a heated argument and fight, but did not expect it to end like this. She opened her mouth slightly, wanting to say something, but found that her throat felt like it was blocked. In the end she just said softly, "Thank you." At this moment the resentment and fear in her heart gradually dissipated, and was replaced by confusion about the future and the new life's expectation. Chapter 8. A Whole New Life. As Isabella and her two sons walked out of that gate, hand in hand, the sunlight poured over them unreservedly, warming them as if cheering for their new life. Isabella took a deep breath of fresh air, her heart filled with relief from the past and longing for the future. She knew that she had finally broken free from the shackles of the past and reclaimed her family, and even though the road ahead was unknown at this moment, her heart was filled with love and hope. After returning to her new settlement, Isabella devoted herself to the operation of the company. With Matteo's help, the company's business, like a huge ship with full sails, broke through the waves in the sea of commerce, growing more and more rapidly and expanding in size. And Luca, a child once shrouded in loneliness and pain, grew up like a flower blooming in the spring breeze, accompanied by his mother and brother. Every morning, Luca wakes up with a big smile on his face as the sun shines through the window. Once quiet, he has become more and more lively, pulling his brother along with him and sharing interesting stories from school with his mother. The sound of his laughter was as clear as a silver bell, echoing in this loving home, making Isabella feel immensely gratified. Luca had rediscovered the innocence and joy that belonged to his age, and his eyes, once dull, now sparkled with the light of love. The twin brothers, Matteo and Luca, are quietly planning a special matchmaking operation. They felt that their mom and dad were very good people. If they could come together and have a complete family, it would be so happy. So they began to secretly discuss various ways. Once, Luca secretly sent a message to Alessandro when Isabella wasn't looking, inviting him to his birthday party, and specifically instructing him to keep it a secret. Matteo, on the other hand, was giving ideas on how to set up the party scene to create a cozy and romantic atmosphere. They fantasize about mom and dad rediscovering their love at the party and then living happily ever after as a family. Alessandro didn't give up either. He would periodically reach out to Isabella to ask how the kids were doing. With each call, he would be careful to take an interest in Isabella's life, his words full of tenderness and concern. He would also carefully prepare gifts to send on important holidays and the children's birthdays. He often recalled bits and pieces of the past and expressed his thoughts and remorse to Isabella, hoping to win her heart again and stand by her side. Isabella naturally senses Alessandro's feelings, and his sincerity sends ripples through her heart. Thinking back to the past, that hasty marriage had brought her endless pain, but now Alessandro's change had shaken her a little. She thought about how the marriage had been so rushed back then that neither of them had had time to really get to know each other, and now it was nice to take things slow and get reacquainted like this. She no longer resisted Alessandro's proximity as much as she once did, and occasionally talked to him about the children growing up and shared the trivialities of life. On a quiet afternoon, Isabella sat in the garden and watched the two children laughing and playing in the grass. The sunlight poured over them, painting a beautiful picture. At that moment her cell phone rang. It was Alessandro calling. She hesitated slightly, then picked up the phone. On the other side of the phone, Alessandra's voice came through with a hint of anticipation. Isabella, I've been thinking lately, can we find some time to meet up and talk about the children together as well as talk about you? Isabella looked at the children and the corners of her mouth rose slightly and said softly, yeah, maybe we really should talk. Hanging up the phone, Isabella's heart was filled with complex emotions. She knew that there was still a long road ahead and the relationship between her and Alessandro was full of unknowns, but she was willing to give each other a chance to get reacquainted, to slowly get closer. Because she believed that with love in her heart, anything was possible. And this home full of love as well as the two lovely children, is her greatest motivation to move forward.